Hello, Martin City Junior Theater for Children here with our brand new show all about dogs. I love dogs, all shapes, all sizes, dogs, dogs, dogs. There have been several famous dogs in Missouri. One dog was named Old Drum, and he was from Warrensburg, Missouri. And there was a trial of the century, and from that trial we found out that man's best friend is indeed his dog. Most recently, a 6-year-old boy was found almost frozen to death, but kept warm by 2 dogs that kept him warm all night, and then he was rescued. But the dog we're going to talk about today is a magical dog. All dogs are magical, but this dog was super magical. Jim, the Wonder Dog. This dog lived from 1925 to 1937, and apparently, legend has it and legacy has it that Jim the Wonder Dog could predict the future. So we hope you enjoy our documentary on Jim the Wonder Dog. Welcome to this evening's episode of Dog News. Howdy, Charlie here on location at the Jim the Wonder Dog Museum in Marshall, Missouri. Viewers, I'd like you to meet Sam. Sam, can you say hi?
Yeah, hi.
I appreciate you letting us look around the museum today. Sam, how long did you own Jim the Wonder Dog for?
I had Jim for 12 years.
Well, you know, back at a theater, they call me Charlie the Wonder Dog because they wonder what I do. I understand you're going to share some stories with our viewers about your adventures with Jim the Wonder Dog.
Yes.
It's sure nice to see you. Now let's enjoy those stories.
I'm Sam Van Arsdale, and I'd like to tell you about my dog Jim. This dog died a long time ago, but I still miss him terribly. For a long time I could find little pieces of Jim's fur on, and I think I still can smell Jim a little bit, but it's probably just my imagination. But I sure miss Jim. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, though. I kind of need to tell you how I got Jim and see where this story starts. 1925, my wife Pearl and I were managing the Arcade Hotel in West Plains, Missouri. There was a guy staying there by the name of Taylor from the state of Louisiana. I don't remember what town in Louisiana, but he was from Louisiana. He said he had this new bunch of pups, purebred pups that came from a long line of hunting dogs, famous hunting dogs like Candy Kid and Eugene's Ghost. All good hunting dogs and famous hunting dogs at that time. He said he'd sell me one of these dogs for $25. And I told him I got two of the best hunting dogs in Missouri anyway. I don't need his overpriced dogs to go hunting. Besides, I can take any hunting dog and make him a good hunting dog. I don't need his old dogs. Well, I think I kind of made him mad because he stomped out and left. And a few weeks later, I got a notice that I had some freight down at the train depot, which I thought was kind of strange because I hadn't ordered anything, but I thought I'd better go down and see what it was. And so I went down there, and they said, "That's this dog over here in the cage for you." And so I looked in the cage, and it was the ugliest old pup I ever saw down there. Great big paws and big old eyes, and that was a strange looking dog. I said, "Well, I didn't order a dog." He said, "Well, it's from some guy named Taylor from Louisiana." So right then I knew what he'd done. He sent me the run of the litter, trying to make me look bad, trying to make me try to train a dog that couldn't be trained. And so I couldn't leave the dog sitting there, so I ended up taking the dog home with me. And he's too small to train to hunt, so I took him out to the kennel. I kept Jim for a while. He was trained by my friend Ira out there, who kept my two dogs. And he took him out with some other pups and tried to train him to be a hunting dog. And he said, "Dog just laid in the shade and wouldn't do anything. He's a worthless dog. You might as well give him away." I said, "Well, I sure don't want to feed him if he's no good as a hunting dog." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take him off your hands if you want me to." And I got thinking, if somebody says something's worthless, but they want to keep it, it's probably not worthless. So I said, "No, I'll take the dog home with me." And so I took that pup on home. And he'd grown up a little bit by that time. And so I thought, well, let me take him out hunting and see what I can do. Then those other dogs maybe just can't handle being around those other dogs. And so I took him out hunting and drove up the car, and he jumped out of the car right away and went on point. And I couldn't even believe he knew what point was. Point is where a dog kind of sticks his hand out, points his nose, and freezes in one place. And that's what a lot of bird dogs do. And he knew right off to do that. So I got out with my shotgun and I eased up towards the field there, and first thing I know, there comes a flock of covey of quail coming out of the ground. I say, "He's a wonderful hunting dog after all." No wonder they wanted to keep him. And so that's how I found out he was a good hunting dog. I started wondering about that time. I can't keep calling this the dog or the pup or something. He needs a name. And I got to thinking that I saw a movie, Will Rogers, the other night, and he was in the movie, and there was a waitress in a cafe asked him, said, "I know you, don't I?" And he kept saying, "No, you don't know me." And he said, "Well, what's your name?" And Will Rogers said, "Well, you can just call me Jim." I don't know if I was thinking about that or if I just looked at the dog and said, "Well, you look like a Jim." Anyway, I named him Jim following that, and that's how he got his name. Jim was a good quail hunting dog, but I found out one day that he had abilities that I didn't know about. I'm going to tell you the story about that. This is the story everybody likes to tell about Jim. Those who heard about Jim, know about Jim, keep telling this story. And for the most part, they're getting it right. But I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. One fall, we were out hunting during the hunting season. It was really hot for that time of the year. And I said to Jim, I said, let's go lay under a hickory tree and rest for a while. Well, Jim took off towards the hickory tree and he sat down under the hickory tree. And I thought that was kind of strange because I didn't know Jim knew a hickory tree from an oak tree, but he sat down, and so I thought, well, let's see what he knows. So I said, Jim, is there an oak tree here? Go sit under it. And he went over and sat under the oak tree. Well, that's something else. I began to think that maybe I pointed, and he noticed I pointed, so I didn't do anything. He said, Jim, let's sit under the elm tree. He went and sat under the elm tree. And about that, boy, Jim knows his trees. I wonder if he knows anything else. About that time, my legs got kind of wobbly, and we're through hunting. I'm going to go tell Pearl. I loaded Jim in the car, and we got going down the road. So I got back to the hotel, and we ran in there. Jim and I went in. We went up to our room in the hotel, and Pearl was in there. I told her what Jim was doing, and she said, oh, that's unbelievable, but don't tell anybody. They'll think we're crazy. Well, of course, immediately I had to go down to the lobby and start showing people what Jim could do. Something one day that I just couldn't believe. We knew Jim had all these abilities, that he could do everything we told him to do. One day the town smart aleck came by, and every town has a smart aleck, of course, and ours came by and he said, if your dog is so smart, can he tell whether my wife's going to have a girl baby or a boy baby? And I said, well, I didn't know whether he could do that, and I never tried anything like that. That's something that's happening in the future, and I don't know if Jim has those abilities, but we can try it. So I took two pieces of paper. On one of them I put boy, and on the other I put girl, and I put it down on the floor, and I said, Jim, is this man's wife going to have a boy or a girl baby? He put his paw on girl. Well, of course, we didn't have any idea whether he was right at that time because she hadn't had the baby and didn't have it for several weeks. Turned out that was right, but that's when I discovered that Jim could predict the future. And so from that point on, we were doing things like he could predict the winner of the World Series, or the Kentucky Derby, or who's going to win the next election. So that became something that we did. I can kind of tell you how we did the Kentucky Derby if you want to know how we did that, because a lot of people ask, how in the world did he pick out all those horses? How do you know which one to pick? So I'll tell you how we did that. We took envelopes and we got the names of all the horses out of the newspaper, and we wrote all the horses' names on each piece of paper. We put each one in an envelope. Nothing on the outside, just the horse's name inside. We sealed up the envelopes. We laid them out across the floor. We said, Jim, who's going to win the next Kentucky Derby? And he'd go and put his paw on one of those envelopes. We'd take that envelope, we'd write her name across the envelope so we'd make sure that was the right one. We'd take that and we'd put it in the hotel safe until the race was over with. The rest of them we burned because we didn't want people betting on what Jim predicted. Turned out Jim was good, right every time, 4 or 5 times in a row, and also the World Series, lots of other things. Tell stories about what Jim did, little stories around the hotel where we lived in Marshall. And let's see, one of those stories is, one day we were sitting there and Pearl said, Jim, you smell, you need a bath. I'm gonna give you a bath later. And that was all they said about it. And pretty soon people looked up, what happened to Jim? He's not around anywhere, and he always stayed close. So we started looking for Jim, went upstairs into our room. Jim was sitting in the bathtub waiting for his bath. Somebody laughed and said, well, he's so smart, why didn't he turn the water on? Funny story that happened at the hotel was there's a woman checking out one time, and she came down to the front desk, and she got down there and she said, oh my, I forgot my false teeth are up on the dresser next to the bed there. I'll have to go back and get them after I check out. So she checked out. About that time, here comes Jim down the stairs carrying her false teeth in his mouth. Handed it to the woman. She didn't have to go back up there. As I think about that, I don't think she washed them off. I think she just took them out of Jim's mouth and stuck them in her mouth. And that's kind of the way I remember it anyway. That's been a long time ago. Another thing we used to do around the hotel is we all these salesmen and people sitting around lobbying. I say, Jim, who has the most loose change in their pocket? Everybody'd reach in their pocket and start counting out their change, and Jim had already identified which one it was. And that was one of the little things we liked to do also.
So, Mr. Sam, those are great stories. We want to hear some more stories from you, Mr. Sam.
People always asking me if Jim ever had any pups, and he did. He had first litter he had was 2 males. He named them Bud and Sonny. And people offered me $1,000 for one of those pups, and I said, no, I'm not selling that. Any of those pups, I'm keeping them all. I kept them out at the kennel where I kept my other dogs. None of those dogs ever had Jim's ability. But they were good hunting dogs, so that was all right too. And you never know when you might have Jim's ability.
Hi, Charlie here, the main interviewer for Dog News. Well, I'm taking a short break here. I've worn myself out talking here about Jim the Wonder Dog. So Molly, my roving reporter, is going to take over for me for a bit. I'll see you soon. I love breaks.
With Dog News. Today's feature, of course, is on Jim the Wonder Dog. I know we all have burning questions for Jim the Wonder Dog's sons, but I would like to ask a question first. It is important to get an answer to this question for our viewers and myself. Am I the most beautiful dog in our film about Jim? I think so. Now to introduce the puppies born from Jim the Wonder Dog. Let's say hello to Bud and Sonny. Bud and Sonny, can you tell us if having a doggy dad who predict the future was hard? I have been told you could never hide anything from your dad, Jim. Because your dad, Jim the Wonder Dog, knew how to predict the future, your dad always knew when you pups were going to make a mess. But we can all predict you loved your dad, Jim the Wonder Dog, and he loved you. One final question, Bud and Sonny, before we finish this interview today. Am I still the most beautiful dog in the film about Jim?
Jim was about 12 years old, and he was still having some medical problems. And one day we were out fishing down at the Lake of the Ozarks, and Jim jumped out of the car and he collapsed on the ground. Oh, I didn't like the look of that, but I said, "What's wrong, Jim?" He didn't move and just kind of whined a little bit. And so I picked him up and put him back in the car, and we drove back into town and took him to Sedalia. Was the closest place. We took him to the vet in Sedalia, and he examined him for a few minutes, said, "Jim's not going to make it." And sure enough, Jim died on his examining table. Well, I, of course, was completely devastated by all this. And I put him back in the car and brought him back to Marshall and tried to decide what to do about it. And we had a plot out at Ridge Park Cemetery here in Marshall, and we wanted Jim buried out there. He was like one of our kids. There's no reason he shouldn't be buried out there. Well, the cemetery people said, "No, you can't put a dog in a people's cemetery. We're not going to let that happen." And so we got thinking about it. I got to figure out some way to make this happen. So I happened to find out that there was a guy who had some property right next to the cemetery that he would sell me. So we bought a little strip of land right next to the cemetery, and we buried Jim there. We put a marker on there that said, "Jim the Wonder Dog, 1925 and 1937. And that grave is visited by a lot of people every day, even now. But Jim got the last laugh out of that anyway, because a few years later the cemetery expanded, and Jim is now in the cemetery, and he's been in the cemetery all this time. Jim had his way of doing things.
Our research for our 2021 movie on Jim the Wonder Dog had ended for the day. We went to pay our respects to Jim before driving back to Kansas City. After driving around for a while, we simply couldn't find Jim's headstone. Ready to give up, suddenly Charlie, our theater dog in the back seat, rolled down the car window with his paw. Despite being in the car many times, Charlie has never rolled down the window. As we followed Charlie's gaze through the open window, it took us straight to Jim's headstone. We were believers before, but happy to tell you, the magic of Jim the Wonder Dog still exists. And now, how about some music before we end our documentary?
Out in Missouri, where some dogs roam, and your best friend to love you has a wagging tail. But the smartest dog ever known is Jim the Wonder Dog. He got his name from forecasting future facts. Every night Jim predicts the ultimate acts. No fooling Jim ever so right that Jim was truly bright. How he knows trees from hickory to the oaks. That dog could envision Jim's not blowing smoke. show his clever mind, Jim told him who would win the World Series. He had predicted pause, my dearie. He was a mystical, our favorite man, a famous dog from Missouri, Jim the Wonder Dog.
So, I hope you enjoyed our documentary, and now you're a believer in Jim the Wonder Dog too. You see, Jim has gathered people together, believers in Jim, to be part of a simpler time. Happiness, friendship, most of all, magic. For more information about Jim the Wonder Dog, please visit this wonderful museum in Marshall, Missouri. And most importantly, God bless you.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.